At 3:42 a.m., the sky over Venezuela's northern coast lit up with a light that no one knew where it came from. In just 15 minutes, a military base near La Guaira was reduced to a field of ash and molten metal. No radar saw it coming, no alarm sounded, and most disconcertingly, no enemy missile was detected in flight. It was on October 17, 2025, at exactly 3:28 a.m., when a group of 3 F-22 Raptors took off from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, bound for the Caribbean. They traveled more than 13,000 kilometers with aerial refueling support through an encrypted communications corridor, following a mission that, according to leaked intelligence sources, was classified as Operation Blue Sea. Their objective? To neutralize a Venezuelan coastal radar installation in the Puerto Maya area, just 60 kilometers from Caracas. The attack lasted exactly 14 minutes and 30 seconds. During that time, the stealth fighters executed a low-altitude flight profile, entering the Los Roques archipelago from the north, without activating transponders or leaving any traces of emissions detectable by the Russian S-300 systems installed in the area. From a tactical command post on the USS Arlington, LPD-24, 210 nautical miles off the Venezuelan coast, the group's commander, identified as Spectre 1, oversaw the operation in real time. The F-22s activated their APG-77 radar in passive mode and launched 4 AGM-158 Bea SSMER missiles, long-range precision weapons with autonomous infrared guidance. The missiles impacted at 3:42 a.m., destroying the base's primary generators, the command center, and an ammunition depot. Minutes after the impact, seismic sensors in Caracas recorded a minor tremor, initially mistaken for an electrical failure. However, satellite images captured by ESA's Sentinel-2B satellite confirmed the magnitude. A 1.4-hectare swathe of land was completely charred. The first Venezuelan response teams arrived at the scene at 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., more than an hour and a half after the attack, due to communications disruptions and the simultaneous collapse of ground-based towers. By that time, the F-22s were already out of range of any radar. They climbed to 14,000 meters and regrouped with a KC-46 Pegasus over the Caribbean Sea to refuel before continuing toward an operational silence zone in the mid-Atlantic. Sources close to Southern Command indicated that the attack was not intended to cause casualties, but rather to test penetration and air denial capabilities in an electromagnetic saturation environment. That is, to measure how the Venezuelan system reacted without prior warning. The Venezuelan government, for its part, remained completely silent for the first 18 hours. It wasn't until 10 p.m. that same day that an official statement mentioned an accidental explosion at a fuel depot. However, videos leaked by local fishermen show multiple flashes on the horizon and a mushroom cloud, which contradict this version. Defense analysts in the region began to talk about a surgical warning strike, a tactic designed not to destroy, but to highlight vulnerabilities. The use of the F-22 in a theater so far from its usual base suggests something deeper, a geostrategic signal. And that's precisely where the real intrigue begins. The key to the attack wasn't the destruction, but the execution time. 15 minutes were enough for a coastal base to disappear from the map without anyone knowing where the attack came from. And such precision can only be explained by meticulous planning. According to a leaked report from the Caribbean Air Command, Operation Blue Sea would have begun its preparation phase on September 2, 2025, with joint simulations between the U.S. Southern Command and NATO units in Rota, Spain. Stealth flight training was conducted through maritime corridors saturated with natural interference, tropical clouds, humid air masses, and thunderstorms. Perfect conditions for camouflaging the F-22's thermal signature. During the actual flight, the fighters maintained encrypted communication via modified Link 16, transmitting only microsecond pulses to avoid tracking. On board, the pilots received targeting data generated by a La Crosse 7 spy satellite orbiting at an altitude of 680 kilometers, capable of detecting metallic structures beneath concrete roofs. The reconnaissance software compared each thermal reflection in real time with a database of Venezuelan industrial firms. This combination of orbital intelligence and total stealth turned the attack into a sixth-generation surgical strike. An operation that, more than a bombing, was a technological demonstration. The Raptors used no flares, deployed no countermeasures, and didn't even break the sound barrier. Their trail was so faint that Venezuelan radars, the Chinese-made Cochavina 27A type, only detected an atmospheric anomaly over the sea, 8 minutes before impact. At 3:34 a.m., the radar station at Cabo Caldera reported a phantom reading, a faint echo, moving at 850 kilometers per hour. The operator didn't flag it as a threat. 40 seconds later, it disappeared from the system. By the time he tried to report it, the first missile had already hit. According to seismic records from the Central University of Venezuela, the 4 impacts occurred exactly 3.6 seconds apart. The explosion coordinates formed a perfect trapezoidal pattern, designed to collapse the structure without scattering shrapnel into sensitive areas. Despite their power, each missile carried a payload of 450 kilograms of penetrating high explosive. The base was disabled without causing casualties in the surrounding area. This precision is what most concerned analysts because, unlike traditional bombings, this attack showed a clear intention to nullify without causing chaos. In fact, several military observers interpret the maneuver as seeking to force a recalibration of the Venezuelan defense network to assess its reaction time, its level of internal coordination, and its dependence on foreign assistance. Meanwhile, the first satellite images spread like wildfire on social media. Shadows of triangular wings on the coast, flashes detected by infrared sensors, and an acoustic echo recorded by an oceanographic buoy from the Curaçao Institute of Marine Research. No official source confirmed it, but they all pointed in the same direction. The attack was not only real, but also meticulously documented. Analysts at the Center for Strategic Studies in Bogotá warned that if the F-22 could operate with such freedom over Venezuela, it could also do so over any point in the Caribbean, even in Allied territories. The worrying thing wasn't the missile, but the message. We can come and go without you noticing. But behind that phrase isn't simple technological arrogance. It's political calculation. Because every military demonstration bears an invisible diplomatic signature, and this one, according to various sources, was reportedly directed beyond Venezuela. Every attack has a hidden message, and this one was no exception. Regional intelligence sources suggest that Operation Mar Azul was, in fact, an indirect warning to third parties, primarily Russia and Iran, whose technical advisors had been operating at the Venezuelan coastal base since early 2024. The destroyed facility was part of the Joint Maritime Surveillance System, a network intended to cover the Gulf of Paria with long-range radars and Kh-35 Irani anti-ship missiles. By eliminating this node, the attack severed the communication line between the command centers in Puerto Cabello, La Guaira, and Barcelona. This temporarily blocked a 400-kilometer stretch of coastline. Specialists from Chile's Naval Studies Institute indicated that, rather than destroying infrastructure, the attack sought to disrupt the data chain that fed the coastal defense system, thereby measuring Venezuela's resilience in an electronic warfare scenario. And all indications are that the plan worked. During the first 36 hours after the attack, commercial maritime traffic in the eastern Caribbean was redirected to secondary routes. Panamanian and Liberian-flagged vessels reported intermittent interference on navigation frequencies and loss of GPS signals near the Venezuelan coast. Most disturbing was the fact that between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m., Curaçao's civilian radars recorded multiple false echoes, as if someone were injecting phantom signals to cover the F-22's withdrawal. A researcher from the Miami Technical Aviation Institute stated that this interference pattern coincides with the activation of the ALR-94 system, the F-22's passive sensor complex, capable of identifying and suppressing enemy transmitters without the need to emit its own waves. In other words, the fighters didn't just attack. They manipulated the electromagnetic environment to create the illusion of normalcy while operating. Around noon on October 17th, Venezuela requested an urgent session of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, seeking to elevate the incident to an international level. However, no Allied power confirmed detection of the incursion. Neither the Russian Cosmos, 2558 satellites, nor radars over the eastern Atlantic recorded any anomalous activity. Absolute silence. And that silence, in intelligence, is often more revealing than any statement. Meanwhile, Washington maintained an ambiguous stance. The Pentagon spokesperson simply stated that no U.S. assets participated in offensive operations in the Caribbean, a phrase ambiguous enough to be denied without denying. However, subsequent movements revealed a different story. 2 days after the attack, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the USS Roosevelt DDG-80, was seen patrolling off Barbados, accompanied by a KC-135 stratotanker refueling aircraft. Several analysts interpreted this deployment as an airspace control maneuver intended to protect the withdrawal of stealth units, or perhaps to demonstrate its presence in the face of any Venezuelan retaliation attempt. Internally, the government's response was equally contradictory, with some spokespeople referring to a random explosion. Others leaked that the affected radar had been hacked minutes before the impact. This would imply remote access to defense systems, suggesting a joint cyberintelligence and air warfare operation. On the global stage, no move occurs in isolation. The attack on the Venezuelan coastal base appears to be part of a strategic reconfiguration of the Caribbean, an area that for decades had remained in relative military calm. However, following Operation Blue Sea, several countries began reviewing their defense agreements, fearing that the next blow would not be symbolic. The most widely accepted hypothesis among Western analysts is that the operation was a real-life test, an undetected entry, attack, and exit exercise designed to measure the F-22's effectiveness against Chinese radars and Russian systems deployed in the region. The result was overwhelming. Total penetration, zero response. In military terms, that's equivalent to a direct message. Air supremacy remains in the hands of the United States. But there was also a psychological component. The speed of the attack and the subsequent silence generated a crisis of technological confidence in Venezuela. For days, reconnaissance flights were suspended, temporary bases were closed, and a complete overhaul of the anti-aircraft system was ordered. That pause, more than any bomb, achieved its objective: to paralyze the defensive network without having to occupy territory.